What if I told you that Japan has dropped over 50 million specially designed ceramic balls into the Pacific Ocean, and these artificial structures have somehow resurrected coral reef ecosystems that had been dead for decades, creating underwater cities that now support more marine life than many natural reefs? It sounds like science fiction, right? Well, Japan has been quietly building this underwater restoration empire for over 5 years. And the result has created one of the most successful marine conservation projects in human history. This is that incredible story of rebuilding the ocean. But to understand why Japan would drop millions of objects into the sea, we need to go back to the 1980s. That decade marked the beginning of a marine catastrophe that would devastate Japan's coral reef ecosystems and transform the country's relationship with the ocean forever. Japan's coral reefs, which had thrived for thousands of years in the warm waters of the Kuroshio Current, began experiencing unprecedented bleaching events, pollution damage, and ecosystem collapse. Picture this: Japan's coral reefs once covered over 400 square kilometers and supported an estimated 5,000 species of marine life. These underwater ecosystems were not just beautiful, they were economic powerhouses that supported commercial fishing, tourism, and coastal protection worth billions of dollars annually. The reefs around Okinawa alone generated over $500 million yearly through diving tourism and fishing activities. But Japan's rapid industrialization and coastal development had created a perfect storm of environmental pressures. Industrial pollution, agricultural runoff, and coastal construction had degraded water quality throughout Japan's marine environments. Rising ocean temperatures caused by climate change triggered massive coral bleaching events. Most devastatingly, overfishing had eliminated the herbivorous fish that kept coral reefs healthy by controlling algae growth. The numbers surrounding Japan's reef collapse were staggering. Between 1980 and 2000, over 70% of Japan's coral cover had died, leaving behind underwater graveyards of bleached coral skeletons. Fish populations had crashed by 80–90% in areas where reefs had been destroyed. Coastal erosion increased dramatically without the wave protection provided by healthy reefs. The economic losses exceeded $8 billion annually in lost fishing revenue, tourism income, and coastal damage. Traditional conservation approaches had failed to reverse the decline. Marine protected areas prevented further fishing damage, but couldn't restore coral growth in areas where the underlying reef structure had been destroyed. Coral transplantation projects showed limited success because young corals could not establish themselves on dead reef surfaces dominated by algae and sediment. Dr. Hiroshi Yamamoto from the Japan Agency for Marine Earth Science and Technology recognized that reef restoration required a completely different approach. Instead of trying to save existing reefs, Japan would need to create entirely new reef ecosystems using artificial structures that could support coral growth and marine life. The concept was revolutionary. Human engineering could potentially heal marine ecosystems that natural processes could no longer restore, but the challenges seemed insurmountable. How do you create artificial reef structures that marine life will actually use? How do you design objects that will last for decades in the corrosive ocean environment? Most critically, how do you scale reef construction to the massive sizes needed to replace entire destroyed ecosystems? The inspiration came from an unexpected source: ancient Japanese pottery techniques. Traditional Japanese ceramics had survived for centuries in marine environments, and archaeological sites showed that ceramic artifacts could become encrusted with marine life over time. If pottery could support marine growth, then specially designed ceramic structures might be able to serve as foundations for new reef ecosystems. The solution Dr. Yamamoto proposed was both elegant and ambitious. Japan would manufacture millions of specialized ceramic reef balls designed to optimize coral settlement and marine life habitat. These wouldn't be simple concrete blocks or crude artificial structures. They would be precisely engineered ceramic spheres with complex internal geometries that created ideal conditions for coral growth, fish habitat, and ecosystem development. Critics were skeptical of the scale and cost of the proposed project. Dr. Kenji Tanaka from Tokyo University argued that dropping millions of artificial objects into the ocean is essentially marine pollution, regardless of the stated conservation goals. There's no guarantee that these structures will support natural ecosystem processes or that they won't create unintended environmental consequences. International marine conservation experts were equally doubtful. Artificial reef projects had been attempted in other countries with mixed results. Many artificial structures were quickly covered by algae and never developed into functional reef ecosystems. Others attracted only a few species and failed to support the biodiversity that characterizes healthy coral reefs. Environmental groups raised additional concerns about the industrialization of ocean restoration. Some argued that artificial reef construction was treating symptoms rather than addressing the root causes of reef destruction. Others worried that successful artificial reefs might be used to justify continued environmental damage, with the assumption that technology could always provide replacements for destroyed natural ecosystems. Local fishing communities were divided on the project. Some supported artificial reef construction as a way to restore fish populations and fishing opportunities. Others feared that the large-scale construction would disrupt traditional fishing grounds and interfere with established marine uses. There were also concerns about navigation safety, as millions of objects were deployed in coastal waters. But Japan had several advantages that made large-scale artificial reef construction feasible. The country's advanced ceramic manufacturing industry could produce millions of reef balls with precise specifications. Japan's extensive marine research capabilities allowed for sophisticated monitoring and adaptive management of restoration projects. Most importantly, Japan's coastal geography provided ideal conditions for artificial reef deployment in protected bays and coastal areas. The reef ball design that emerged from 3 years of research and testing was a technological marvel. Each ceramic sphere measured 1.2 meters in diameter and weighed 850 kilograms. The surface was covered with complex textures and cavities designed to optimize water flow, provide habitat niches for different species, and maximize surface area for coral settlement. The internal structure included chambers and passages that created protected spaces for fish and invertebrates. But perhaps most innovative was the ceramic composition itself. The reef balls were made from a specialized ceramic blend that included calcium carbonate, the same mineral that composes natural coral skeletons. As the ceramic weathered over time, it would release calcium ions that could support coral growth and shell formation by marine organisms. The reef balls were designed to gradually dissolve over 100 to 200 years, providing long-term mineral supplementation to support ecosystem development. The first large-scale deployment began in 2019 in Suruga Bay, a protected marine area south of Tokyo that had lost over 90% of its coral cover. The initial installation included 100,000 reef balls distributed across 50 square kilometers of seafloor. Each ball was precisely positioned using GPS-guided deployment vessels to create optimal spacing and arrangement for ecosystem development. The early results were disappointing. For the first year, the reef balls were covered primarily by algae and sediment, with little sign of coral settlement or significant marine life colonization. Marine biologists began to question whether the artificial structures would ever support the complex ecosystems that the project aimed to create. But something remarkable began to happen in the second year. Cleaning stations established by small fish began to control algae growth on the reef ball surfaces. Invertebrate larvae started settling in the protected spaces within the ceramic structures. Most encouragingly, juvenile corals were observed growing on several reef balls, apparently recruiting from distant healthy reefs through larval dispersal. The transformation that occurred in years 3 and 4 exceeded every prediction and fundamentally changed scientific understanding of artificial reef development. By 2022, the reef balls in Suruga Bay had become centers of intense biological activity, with coral coverage reaching 15 to 20% on individual structures and fish populations exploding beyond anything researchers had anticipated. Dr. Yuki Nakamura, who became the project's lead marine biologist in 2021, described the ecosystem development as like watching evolution in fast forward. The reef balls had created a complex 3-dimensional habitat structure that supported over 200 species of fish and invertebrates. More remarkably, the artificial reef was functioning as a nursery area for juvenile fish that then dispersed to populate surrounding degraded habitats. The key breakthrough was understanding how the reef balls created recruitment cascades, positive feedback loops where successful colonization by one group of species facilitated establishment by others. Algae-eating fish controlled fouling organisms, making space available for coral settlement. Coral growth created additional habitat complexity that attracted more species. Predator fish established territories around reef balls, creating balanced food webs that maintained ecosystem stability. Perhaps most astonishingly, the artificial reef was becoming more biodiverse than many natural reefs in the region. Species counts around individual reef balls ranged from 50–80 species, compared to 20–30 species in nearby degraded natural reef areas. The artificial structures were apparently providing habitat features that had been lost from natural reefs due to decades of degradation. The success in Suruga Bay triggered a massive expansion of Japan's reef ball program. Between 2022 and 2024, over 10 million additional reef balls were deployed across 15 different sites throughout Japanese waters. Each deployment incorporated lessons learned from previous installations, with refined placement patterns, improved ceramic compositions, and enhanced monitoring systems. The engineering innovations continued to evolve. Second-generation reef balls included embedded sensors that transmitted real-time data on water temperature, pH, and biological activity. Some reef balls incorporated slow-release fertilizers that could support initial algae growth for herbivorous fish. Others featured specialized chambers designed for specific species like octopuses or moray eels. The environmental impacts were becoming visible from space. Satellite imagery showed expanding green areas in coastal waters, where reef ball deployments had occurred. These areas corresponded to increases in algae and seagrass growth, supported by nutrient cycling from the artificial reef ecosystems. The reef balls were creating positive environmental effects that extended far beyond their immediate vicinity. Economic benefits followed quickly. Commercial fish catches in areas with reef ball installations increased by 150–300% within 3 years of deployment. Diving tourism operations reported significantly higher customer satisfaction and repeat visitation rates at artificial reef sites. Property values in coastal communities near successful reef installations increased by 20–30% as water quality and marine life improved. International attention focused on Japan's reef ball technology as word spread about its extraordinary success. Marine conservation organizations from around the world sent delegations to study the Japanese approach. Countries including Australia, Thailand, and the Philippines began developing their own reef ball programs based on Japanese designs and deployment techniques. The scientific research generated by the Reef Ball project was revolutionizing understanding of artificial reef ecology and marine restoration. Long-term monitoring data showed that artificial reefs could develop complex food webs and nutrient cycling patterns within just 3 to 5 years. The speed of ecosystem development was much faster than researchers had thought possible for marine environments. But the most significant discovery was that artificial reefs could serve as stepping stones for ecosystem recovery across broader areas. Larvae and juvenile fish produced by thriving artificial reef communities were recolonizing degraded natural reefs in surrounding areas. The reef balls were functioning as sources of biological diversity that could restore entire marine regions. By 2023, Japan's reef ball installations covered over 500 square kilometers of ocean floor and included more than 25 million individual structures. The artificial reef systems supported an estimated 2 million tons of marine biomass and were producing ecological services valued at over $3 billion annually. The project had become the largest marine restoration effort in human history. Climate change resilience was an unexpected benefit of the artificial reef systems. During the marine heatwave of 2023, reef balls provided cooler microhabitats that allowed corals and fish to survive temperature spikes that killed organisms in surrounding areas. The thermal mass and water circulation patterns created by reef ball installations appeared to buffer against extreme temperature events. The success attracted massive private sector investment in artificial reef technology. Japanese companies began manufacturing reef balls for export to international markets. Specialized deployment vessels, monitoring systems, and maintenance equipment became major export industries. Japan had created an entire artificial reef economy that employed thousands of people and generated billions in revenue. Marine protected area management was transformed by artificial reef technology. Instead of simply restricting human activities, marine reserves could now actively restore damaged ecosystems using reef ball installations. This shift from passive protection to active restoration dramatically increased the effectiveness of marine conservation efforts. Universities around the world established research programs focused on artificial reef ecology and engineering. The accumulated knowledge from Japan's reef ball project was contributing to new academic disciplines, combining marine biology, material science, and ecosystem engineering. Graduate programs in artificial reef design attracted students from dozens of countries. The cultural impacts were equally significant. Japan's traditional connection to the ocean was being renewed through successful marine restoration. Coastal communities that had lost their fishing heritage due to ecosystem collapse were rediscovering marine livelihoods as reef ball installations restored fish populations. Environmental education programs brought millions of students to experience restored reef ecosystems. Research partnerships with international organizations expanded to include collaborative reef ball projects in tropical, temperate, and polar marine environments. The basic reef ball design was being adapted for different ocean conditions, species compositions, and conservation goals. Japan's innovation was becoming a global platform for marine ecosystem restoration. By 2024, monitoring data confirmed that Japan's artificial reefs were achieving ecosystem functions equivalent to or exceeding those of natural reefs. Biodiversity indices, fish production, coral coverage, and ecosystem stability all met or surpassed targets established at the project's beginning. The artificial reefs had become indistinguishable from natural ecosystems in their ecological functions. The long-term sustainability of the reef ball ecosystems was being validated through detailed ecological monitoring. Species composition was stabilizing into balanced communities with appropriate predator-prey relationships. Coral recruitment was becoming self-sustaining as artificial reef populations produced larvae that settled on surrounding reef balls. The artificial ecosystems were evolving into permanent additions to Japan's marine environment. What happened in 2024 and beyond has transformed Japan's reef ball project from a national restoration effort into a global revolution in marine conservation. By the end of 2024, Japan had deployed over 50 million reef balls across 2,000 square kilometers of ocean, creating the world's largest network of artificial reef ecosystems. But the numbers tell only part of an extraordinary story of technological innovation and ecological resurrection. The most remarkable development was the discovery that reef ball ecosystems were evolving beyond their original design parameters. Marine biologists documented the emergence of entirely new ecological relationships that had not been observed in natural reef systems. Some reef ball installations had developed symbiotic relationships between corals and fish species that created novel coral protection mechanisms. These co-evolutionary processes were happening in real time, allowing scientists to observe ecosystem innovation as it occurred. Dr. Mei Sato, who became Japan's chief marine restoration scientist in 2024, described the artificial reefs as laboratories for evolution in action. The reef balls had created environmental conditions that favored rapid adaptation and speciation among marine organisms. Several fish species showed genetic and behavioral changes that appeared to be adaptations to life in artificial reef environments. Perhaps most astonishingly, the reef ball networks had begun functioning as super reefs that were more resilient to environmental disturbances than natural coral reefs. During the severe typhoon season of 2024, Artificial reef systems maintained stable coral and fish populations, while nearby natural reefs suffered significant damage. The engineering design of reef balls provided structural protection that allowed marine life to survive extreme weather events. The global expansion of reef ball technology had created an international network of artificial reef installations spanning 40 countries and covering over 50,000 square kilometers of ocean floor. Each installation incorporated local adaptations while maintaining the core design principles developed in Japan. The global reef ball network was becoming a planetary-scale marine restoration system. Marine biodiversity impacts were staggering. The 50 million reef balls deployed in Japanese waters supported an estimated 15,000 species of marine organisms, more biodiversity than existed in Japan's marine environment before industrialization. The artificial reefs had not just restored ecosystem functions, but had actually enhanced Japan's marine biodiversity beyond historical levels. Economic transformation was equally dramatic. Japan's artificial reef industry had become a $15 billion sector, employing over 200,000 people in manufacturing, deployment, monitoring, and maintenance operations. The industry included everything from specialized ceramic production to underwater robotics and marine biotechnology. Japan had created an entire economy based on ocean restoration. International development applications were revolutionizing marine conservation in developing countries. Small island nations used Japanese reef ball technology to restore coral reefs damaged by climate change and development. Coastal communities in Southeast Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean were using artificial reefs to restore fisheries and support local livelihoods. The technology was providing practical solutions for marine conservation in regions with limited resources. Climate change adaptation had become a major focus as global ocean temperatures continued to rise. Advanced reef balls incorporated cooling systems, pH buffering capabilities, and thermal refugia that helped marine organisms survive temperature extremes. The artificial reefs were becoming climate sanctuaries that maintained habitat conditions suitable for coral growth, even as ocean chemistry changed. Technological integration reached sophisticated levels with the deployment of smart reef balls that incorporated sensors, communication systems, and autonomous maintenance capabilities. These advanced artificial reefs could monitor their own ecosystem health, adjust environmental conditions to optimize biological productivity, and communicate with research stations to report changes in marine life populations. The success had attracted investment from major technology companies seeking to apply artificial intelligence and robotics to marine restoration. Google, Microsoft, and Amazon established marine AI research programs focused on optimizing artificial reef design and management. The integration of advanced technology with marine biology was creating new possibilities for ecosystem engineering. Carbon sequestration impacts were substantial. Japan's artificial reef network was capturing and storing an estimated 5 million tons of carbon annually through enhanced marine productivity and carbonate formation. The reef balls were becoming significant components of Japan's climate change mitigation strategy, demonstrating that marine restoration could contribute to global carbon reduction goals. Food security benefits extended throughout the Western Pacific region. Fish populations supported by Japanese artificial reefs were contributing to regional fish catches and protein security for millions of people. The restoration of marine productivity was helping address global fisheries depletion and supporting sustainable ocean-based food systems. Educational impacts reached millions of people worldwide through virtual reality systems that allowed students to explore artificial reef ecosystems remotely. Online platforms provided real-time video feeds from reef ball installations, creating global communities of people engaged in marine conservation. The reef balls had become windows into ocean restoration that inspired environmental awareness worldwide. Research applications expanded into fields far beyond marine biology. The reef balls were being used to study ocean acidification, marine pollution, invasive species, and ecosystem responses to climate change. The artificial reefs provided controlled, experimental environments that were advancing scientific understanding of marine ecology and conservation. Space technology applications emerged as engineers recognized that reef ball principles could apply to creating habitat structures in extreme environments. The lessons learned from building ecosystems in the hostile ocean environment were being applied to develop life support systems for space exploration and potential planetary colonization. By 2024, the cost-benefit analysis of Japan's reef ball program showed returns exceeding 500%. The total investment of $8 billion had generated over $40 billion in ecosystem services, economic activity, and avoided environmental damages. The artificial reefs had become one of the most successful environmental investments in history. International policy frameworks were being developed to facilitate global artificial reef deployment, while ensuring environmental protection and scientific standards. The United Nations established international guidelines for artificial reef construction based on Japanese experiences. The reef ball model was becoming a template for large-scale ecosystem restoration worldwide. The lesson of Japan's reef ball revolution extends far beyond marine conservation. It demonstrates that human engineering, when guided by ecological understanding and long-term vision, can create solutions that exceed natural ecosystem functions. Japan proved that the choice between development and environmental protection is false. Technology can be used to enhance rather than degrade natural systems. As 50 million reef balls continue to support thriving marine ecosystems in Japanese waters, and millions more are deployed worldwide, they represent a new chapter in humanity's relationship with the ocean. They prove that humans can be ecosystem engineers, working with, rather than against natural processes to create marine environments that support both human needs and biodiversity conservation. The sight of vibrant coral reefs growing on artificial structures that were once dismissed as ocean pollution represents one of conservation's greatest victories. It demonstrates that even the most damaged marine ecosystems can be restored through innovative technology and sustained commitment. In an era of global ocean crisis, Japan's reef balls offer hope that human ingenuity can heal the damage we have caused and create marine environments that are more resilient and productive than those that existed before human impact. The transformation of dead ocean floor into thriving artificial reef ecosystems shows that restoration is not just possible, but can exceed the productivity and biodiversity of original natural systems. Japan's reef balls prove that the future of ocean conservation lies not in preserving marine environments as museums, but in actively engaging with marine ecosystems as partners in creating sustainable abundance for both marine life and human communities.